Razer has just now announced and released the Kishi Ultra, and I just so happen to have one on hand right here. This is a review unit that they sent to me early to check out and go hands-on with. And this is a very interesting controller for a few different reasons. You know, Razer has released other mobile controllers in the past using the same Kishi name, but those have all been designed with the idea of trying to keep an overall small footprint so that your phone still feels like, you know, a phone-sized handheld, whereas the Ultra is targeting being something a bit bigger. It is much more comparable to a full-size pro gaming controller with a bunch of additional special features to add on to that list, which we'll talk about in a second. One of the immediate really cool things about this, though, I want to talk about is that not only is it larger in the sense of, you know, bigger, more pronounced hand grips and buttons and sticks, but also the bridge connecting both ends actually extends out farther than the Kishi as well as other mobile controllers out there in order to not only accommodate things like phones, but even smaller sized tablets, including an 8-inch iPad, enabling a much larger screen experience than normally possible with mobile controllers like this. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of what this thing can do and how well it handles, and we'll start with just an overview of, you know, buttons, sticks, ports, all that good stuff. To begin with, this is a USB-C based device, so you are able to use it with the latest iPhones, iPhone 15, which jumped over to USB-C, but if you're using an older iPhone that's still Lightning based, not an option with this controller. Otherwise, Android phones, smaller Android tablets, iPad mini, all gonna fit in here, no problem. Now, another important aspect of this is how those devices actually fit into the grip itself. Right now, you'll notice that I actually have the cushions removed, and that's because that allows me to fit my phone with a case into it more comfortably. But if I'm not using a case, there are 3 different cushion pads you can equip that allow it to fit a different array of devices. On the bottom are a pair of ports. We have an auxiliary port, so you can plug in a wired headset if you like, and a USB-C port that you can use as a pass-through charger. So if you want to charge whatever device you're using with the Kishi Ultra, you can charge it that way. Though it does have an additional interesting use, which is being able to use this directly as a controller on PC and tablets, which I'll talk about a little more in a bit. Now, as far as how all the buttons and sticks and everything feel, for these sticks, the tension on them for me is just right. I tend to like having a slightly higher amount of tension on my stick heads. I don't want something that feels too loose, and this is hitting a sweet spot for me personally. And on top of that, they do of course have anti-friction rings, so in situations where you have to spin the stick around or do things like quarter circle inputs, half inputs, it's going to be a nice and smooth experience. If you've watched me review other Razer products in the past, one of the things that I am continuously a big fan of is their mecha tactile inputs. This is something they've used on the ABXY for a number of the controllers as well as the D-pad, and that makes a return on the Kishi Ultra. It just has such a nice balance of something that feels like a softer button press, but still has that very tactile mouse click feedback that I personally really love. It is present on all the front-facing ABXYs. It is also present in all 8 directions of the D-pad, giving a nice sense of feedback when you're doing things like rolling inputs. I could certainly see some people preferring a more traditional soft D-pad touch, in which case that is something to be aware of, that this doesn't have that. This is going to give you a very clicky feedback. It's something that I personally actually really dig as an alternative design, but it is an intentional choice to be aware of. Meanwhile, L1 and R1 have a more simple clicky feedback to them. R2 and L2 are fairly pronounced triggers that I would say, out of any kind of mainline controller I would compare them to, are very reminiscent of a DualShock 4. You know, they have that better travel distance compared to something like the DualShock 3, while also offering this top that just curves up, giving you plenty of space of where you want to rest your finger. And there are a pair of additional remappable buttons located on the inside here rather than relying on back buttons, which you might accidentally press, is a thing that people can get really worried about. They are instead located at the top between the sets of shoulder buttons, so if you ever have to click one, you just quickly reach over and give it a nice little kick. It has that similar mecha tactile feedback as the ABXY buttons. After all that, there's also of course the more pronounced grip of the Ultra that does feel much more comparable to a traditional full-size controller. Personally, I found this to be very comfortable. It does have a little cross-hatching. It's not a different material, it's still going to be the same hard plastic, but the cross-hatching does help for grip if you ever have the habit of getting your hands just a little bit sweaty when you're playing a lot. While I've personally found this controller to be very comfortable, one of the things that I really like to test with some controllers is I hand them to my wife, whose hands are a lot smaller, just to get an idea for, you know, people who have smaller hands, how something like that might feel. And for her, she found that the sticks, buttons, all the kind of important functional things of being able to reach everything, including the remap buttons on the inside and reaching all the way to the top for things like the Y button or options, all felt within reach and comfortable. The only problem she had was that the grips on the back just felt a little too large. It kind of felt like on her fingers, kind of wrapping around here, just was a bit larger and less comfortable than she would like. But as far as the functionality of being able to reach everything, no problems. Honestly, overall, as far as just how the buttons and sticks and everything feel fantastic experience. So much so that one of the interesting additional uses of it is, like I mentioned earlier, using this USB-C port, you can plug this directly into a PC or a tablet to use as a controller directly. This is a feature that I've seen on some similar controller styles like this before, and it's something that I haven't always been the biggest fan of. It's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, sure, you can, but why would you if you have another controller on hand? And while I still feel a little bit of that with the Ultra, it actually works out very nicely. I used this directly on my PC for a while to play a couple different select games. I jumped into a little Sekiro, a little Doom, a little bit of Fallout 4 just because the TV series has been going on, so I want to play that some more. And it is a fully functional, good feeling controller. The only aspects of it that feel just a little odd to me is that because especially this is designed to carry a controller in the middle, the weight distribution ends up causing it to feel a little light if there's not anything actually plugged in between. And then just from being so used to using a traditional controller, the gap in distance between the two, sure, is something I'm used to while playing a handheld, but when I'm looking up at a screen or something, it's kind of just an odd sensation to have this distance between them. I'm not going to necessarily say that the Kishi Ultra is going to replace the idea of, getting a dedicated Pro controller for your PC or tablet, but as far as another way to take advantage of the controller goes, it works out pretty well. Now, as far as some additional special features go, a lot of this is taken advantage of through the Razer Nexus app that not only allows you to access and customize some of the special features in the Kishi, but through the Nexus library, you're able to do things like browse through what apps you have that are able to take advantage of the controller. You can also see recommendations for other games and stuff on the app market that you can grab. It just acts as a way of basically making the experience of using your phone or a tablet feel like something much closer to an actual dedicated handheld experience. Aside from that, as far as customizing the controller goes, you of course have the ability to map whatever buttons or D-pad direction you want to the two remappable buttons up top. You of course have the ability to customize the lights on the Kishi Ultra, because how could it possibly be a premium Razer product without something that lights up and is customizable? And then one other interesting feature I think is worth drawing attention to is the fact that, a big talking point right now when it comes to a lot of controllers is that more and more people have been becoming aware of what type of sticks their controllers are using. Hall effect is becoming a big talking point in a lot of third-party controllers as they're released, and these are not Hall effect sensor sticks. However, through the Nexus app, you are able to customize and control the dead zone for these sticks. So if you happen to notice any small degree of drift because the center point has just been thrown off over a long period of time, you do have the option to adjust the dead zone in order to help correct and fix that. Now, the majority of my time with this was spent on my iPhone 15, but I did also spend some time with using it on Razer's own Razer Edge tablet, which is basically what I go to when I need to use something that has Android on it. And for Android devices, there are a couple other features that are available that are not on iOS, one of which is the ability to do control mapping for those games that only have touchscreen controls. There are a number of titles that might play nice with a controller on iOS, but don't on Android for one reason or another. A great example of this would be something like PlayStation Remote Play. If you're not using a DualSense controller, it just gets mad at you and doesn't let you use anything else. So with this, you're able to do things like go to those games, PlayStation Remote Play, Genshin Impact, things where you have to use touchscreen controls on Android, and map all the buttons and sticks to those on-screen controls so you're able to actually use a controller in an indirect way, which is very handy. Another feature that is Android exclusive, and this is much more interesting in terms of something that iOS loses out on, is a new haptics technology that Razer is taking advantage of. Basically what this does is that for those games that innately support haptics, you're going to be able to take advantage of that with this controller, but even for those games that don't have haptic support, it's actually able to create its own in-depth vibrations based on the sound being generated by the game. And it's not just a simple rumble where, oh, something loud happens, so therefore the controller rumbles. No, it actually is doing fine-tuned different types of haptics depending on what exact sounds and things are happening in the game. And I mean, personally, I'm a really big fan of immersive features like this. It was one of the things that I've really praised about the DualSense controller time and time again, is that I love the haptics on that, and I would love to see other controllers take more advantage. I want to see Xbox do something like that. And so having a mobile controller option that does that is really damn cool. Look, overall, when it comes to a mobile controller like this and what kind of matters for getting the most out of playing games on your phone or small tablet, I really like a lot of what the Kishi Ultra is emphasizing. I think it is a comfortable controller. The buttons and sticks feel great. The fact that it can accommodate larger size devices like small tablets is really nice. I think this adds a really new, interesting way of using those. I honestly don't have that much in the form of complaints. I think the only big one for me, and this has been an ongoing thing with a lot of these bridge-style controllers, not just from Razer but from others as well, I would really love if they had a first-party case option, preferably one that would be bundled in, but I get it if it was sold separately. just giving me a way of putting this away in a bag that I feel a little bit better about. I don't think the bridge feels, weak by any means. It's not like it's gonna snap at the lightest bit of pressure, but it's just, if I'm throwing stuff in a backpack or in a suitcase or in luggage, whatever, it's just one of those things where a little bit of extra peace of mind would be wonderful. Now, of course, one last important talking point is price, which when it comes to Razer, stuff's never cheap. That's just, you already know that going into the brand. And I will say, while it is expensive, it's not as bad as I thought it could have been when I first heard the feature list and everything. This goes for $150. When I first was hearing just all the features and stuff it had, I thought it was going to probably go for $180 to $200. $150 is certainly still not cheap and does put it at the more expensive end for something like this, but in terms of the quality you're getting out of it, I honestly actually think that's pretty worth it. If you compare that to something like, say, buying a PlayStation Portal, that's $200 to get a device dedicated just to remote playing PS5. This is turning a small iPad or phone into something that is remote playing. Not only that, but also playing things native to the platforms and remote playing other devices like Xbox. There are certainly more affordable options out there if you just want something to get it done. But as far as something that is a higher quality controller that's bringing greater comfort, I'm honestly very happy with this controller. So those are my thoughts on the Razer Kishi Ultra. If you are interested in grabbing one, I do have a link posted down below in the description. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button to let me know, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you guys later.